Hello and welcome to Diplomatic Corner. My name is Chiamaka Okafor. This is Diplomatic Corner of Premium Times. And today we are here at Nigeria's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where we will be speaking to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Geoffrey Onyeama, here in Nigeria. We'll be talking about a host of issues, especially his tenure as Nigeria's Minister for Foreign Affairs in the last 8 years, and of course, the ongoing crisis in Sudan. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
So it's only natural that we start with the front burner issue today in Africa and of course concerning Nigeria, which will be the issue in Sudan. Sudan is a neighbor somewhat to Nigeria. So the link from Sudan to Chad and then Nigeria. Are there security concerns around what the fallouts of this crisis will be for Nigeria, given our recent wars with insecurity ourselves? Are we concerned that this might also add to our troubles?
That's a very good question, and I think you're absolutely right. Yes, we have to be absolutely very concerned because we saw that the crisis in Libya, it led to the insecurity we have in this country, and clearly what's going on in Sudan can exacerbate that. So we have to be very much very vigilant on our toes, and yes, absolutely take whatever preemptive measures we can take to ensure that we don't have a crisis exacerbated by what's going on in Sudan.
There's been not so quiet comments around Wagner's involvement in the ongoing crisis in Sudan and how it's another proxy war between Russia and the West. Of course, it's been established that Wagner is present in Sudan, but I mean, we don't know how much involvement they have in the war. And this also brings us to talk about the presence of Russia and, of course, the scramble, really, if I dare say, around Africa and Africans. Maybe a renewal of the Cold War, if you like. What's Nigeria's position on this? I mean, we have this big brother role we play on the continent. So how are we reacting to this? Are we thinking about this? Is it something we're looking at?
Yeah, a good question again. Well, first of all, you say that we know that Wagner is involved in Sudan. We don't know that. Officially, we haven't been presented with any concrete evidence or hard facts.
Yeah, so there's an Al Jazeera reports to that.
Yeah, that they are there.
Yeah.
They may be, I'm not saying that they're not, but we don't have any. But clearly, yes, they are operating in countries nearby.
Yeah.
And I think you're right that one of the concerns that we all have is that Africa should not be again a battleground for another Cold War. So this is something we're very concerned about to ensure that it doesn't happen. And how are we doing that? Obviously through the ECOWAS to a certain, as far as, because Wagner started getting involved in Mali. And then, it seems in Guinea-Bissau. So ECOWAS is very concerned about that and trying as a collective to address that. But clearly our position is that we don't want the Cold War repeated on African territory again. So we would certainly act, but you talk about Nigeria as a big brother, but we also are very reticent about acting unilaterally in African conflicts. We believe in using the multilateral structures that exist. So ECOWAS for West Africa, the African Union for the rest of Africa, and even IGAD, which is Intergovernmental Authority for Development, which groups the East African and North Horn of African countries. Now they have an IGAD plus. And Nigeria is actually that plus. So although we're not in IGAD, but we are part of the IGAD plus because of our maybe big brother role. So we will use all those fora, all those multilateral frameworks to hopefully be able to stop the move towards Africa becoming another battleground for East-West conflict.
Yeah, thank you. So we'll take a break, and when we return, we'll move on to the West Africa region and other issues around Africa. So moving on from the conversation around Wagner in within the West African region and also Africa, there's the question about BRICS and the non-alignment movement in Africa and what South Africa's membership of BRICS means and how this is disrupting or affecting the global political landscape as well as Africa's non-alignment position from, the then days, if I did say so. What does this mean for the continent in terms of non-alignment? What does BRICS existence? Of course, it's an economic bloc, but it seems to be disrupting the political part of things.
No, I don't think BRICS is in any way really disrupting. Um, is a disrupting the global peace, as it were. Because they're disparate countries. If you look at the countries of BRICS, you're not going to see any east-west alignment possibilities there, really, because you have Brazil, which is very much part of the Western Hemisphere, part of well, it's not aligned, developing country, but it's very much a part of the I would say Western global system, possibly. Yes, of course, you then have Russia, but then you have India also, which is part of the so it's we don't see it, and I'm not sure that any other country, even the Western countries, necessarily see it also as in any way representing anything more than an economic grouping. It's true that there were these naval maneuvers recently with the Russian Navy and the South African Navy and so forth. But again, we don't believe that really is a cause for alarm or concern. We see BRICS as they're different groupings globally around the world. You'll see that all over. Some of them are with countries that are within the same region or sub-region. Some are, with countries that have similar interests. So I think BRICS is just another one.
Is Nigeria interested in becoming a member of BRICS?
At the moment, it's not obvious what added value being a member of BRICS would bring, and but clearly, if we saw that it would be beneficial to Nigeria, then yes, maybe. But as things stand, it's not obvious what the value addition would be. And I think just joining alliances or groupings just for the sake of joining alliances and groupings really doesn't make sense.
So I'll go step back and then come back again. The question on BRIC is to also ask on South Africa's comment yesterday about exiting the ICC. Now, there's speculations that this statement was made by President Ramaphosa ahead of the upcoming BRICS summit, which is going to hold in Pretoria later this year. And because, of course, as a signee to ICC, the Statute of Rome, South Africa is expected to arrest President Putin, who will be part of that meeting, or the summit rather. And this perhaps is a way to say, oh, we won't do this. And we saw that South Africa pulled the same stunt in 2016 when it didn't arrest Omar al-Bashir of Sudan. So does this, would you still say that, BRICS doesn't present any political threat or, a potential alternative in the changing political system?
It's always been a challenge for some countries, especially, we've seen in the past, as you correctly pointed out, in the case of Omar Bashir, that countries are very, very reluctant to arrest a head of state of a friendly country on behalf or on the say-so of an international body like the ICC or the so that's always a big problem because countries will not do that. I didn't hear that Ramaphosa indicated that South Africa could withdraw from the ICC because of that, but again, that in itself does not make BRICS the BRICS grouping a threat in any way to world peace or no, I mean it doesn't. It's just a decision of a particular head of state, as a response to a request by the ICC. So but I can take your point. I mean, I can see what you're implying, that the BRICS alliance seems now to be getting very much into a almost as if it were a confrontation with the West, all because essentially, I think, of the Ukraine crisis. That's what's sort of accentuating it. But I don't think that it's just the BRICS. I think all the other countries that are neutral in the war between Ukraine and Russia are, in one way or the other, or in one forum or the other, are going to be clashing a bit with the West, because the West, is like making it almost a precondition for so many things for all countries to be against Russia on Ukraine.
So with that, do you see us walking back to the Cold War era, the battle between the West and Russia? And do you see that these countries, including Nigeria, who have stayed neutral all through this, in their responses will find an expression in BRICS, which would then mean taking sides with Russia?
No. No, we don't see it. You see, the Cold War is a bit different, was a different scenario, because it was the Soviet Union. It wasn't just even Russia. And most of those countries that were in the Soviet Union are now very much part of the Western Bloc. Either they're in the EU, they're in NATO, right up to countries that have almost even 50% ethnic Russian populations, like Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, those kinds of countries. So it's a different scenario completely. Now, what you have is really Russia being on the opposite side in its fight with Ukraine, and I don't think I don't know of any country that has come out to say, apart from maybe Belarus, we support Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Most countries will say we're neutral, and will not vote at the resolutions, or will vote or will abstain, So I don't think that we're going towards a Cold War as it obtained in the past. But what you're going to see more is that the Western countries are going to try to isolate Russia. I mean, that's really what they're just trying to do, economically, socially, politically, militarily, and everything else, And but I don't think that because certain countries refuse to be part of that sanctions regime on Russia, that necessarily pulls them into a Cold War situation with the West. But Nigeria not joining BRICS, I think, is solely down to the fact that Nigeria does not have an immediate interest in joining BRICS.
Interesting. Talking about West Africa, the region has been fraught with a lot of coups and more coups. Are we worried that, this might, in no distant time, be Nigeria's story? A
That would be a
military
cool.
intervention.
Well, no, well, we've gone over 20 years, democracy, changing governments democratically, and all that. So one does not see, a coup um, coming in Nigeria. I think we've gone beyond. Well, touch wood. I think, I would like to think that we've gone beyond the stage of coups. As a country, we've evolved beyond that. Yeah, and the institutions are stronger. The democratic institutions are stronger, and the country is big and vast and a bit more complicated. So it wouldn't be that easy, I think, to also have a coup in the Nigeria of today.
The Nigeria of today, and when I say today, I mean today being 26th of April. So the past election has, put a lot of pressure, if I dare say, around how much of a united people we are, where the Nigerianness in us is, and people are angry for several justifiable reasons. And, so before the election, there was also a conversation about an interim government. And this brings me back to the question of a military intervention. Do you think we're strong enough to go through this phase? And this phase will be angry Nigerians in different parts of the country, including those who believe that their mandates have been stolen, and all those conversations. Could this result in the kind of, I'd like to use the example of Sri Lanka, the kind of protest and crisis we saw in Sri Lanka that outside the president and all these kinds of issues, including that of Peru, of course?
Well, we'll have to wait and see. But I still think that there's a certain resilience that we've developed in the country that will equip us to come out through this. We've had all kinds of challenges, in the recent past as well. That the militancy, the IPOFs, the Boko Harams, the banditries, the herdsmen, and the country is resilient. The country is resilient, and I think can weather all that storm, and also respond, appropriately, but be able to respond and reshape, to those stresses, to its unity and peace.
We'll take another break here, and when we return, we'll talk more about Nigeria's foreign policy. So, on Nigeria's foreign policy in the last 8 years, not until the president's chief of staff, Ibrahim Gambari, made clear what the country's foreign policy direction is, a lot of us were in the dark. But I would like to ask, how would you accept the notion that Nigeria's foreign policy has been defined by status?
Defined by?
Status.
I'm not quite sure I understand.
So it's just stagnant, nothing innovative about.
And what did Gambari say it was?
The country's foreign policy first is around our immediate neighbors, Chad, Benin, Niger, before West Africa, Africa, and then the world.
But what's the foreign policy there? No, I don't think that's correct. Our foreign policy is, I think it was clear. I mean, we've been saying this all the time from day one. that a foreign policy is an extension of the interests of a country, your national interests. So you leverage on your relations with foreign countries to promote those national interests. So there's no magic word, citizens diplomacy, or
Economic diplomacy.
and all these things that you can say defines your foreign policy, because your foreign policy also can evolve. Now we're developing policies about Sudan, as you yourself asked. What are the threats to Nigeria? So foreign policies are evolving all the time. You can't just say our foreign policy is this and that's the end of it, or that our foreign policy starts with our near neighbors. Our trade with Europe is 100 times more than our trade with Cameroon, with Benin, or Niger. So we cannot talk about that our foreign policy is with our near neighbors, as such. But when Mr. President came on as president, he identified the core interests of the country. So our foreign policy is going to be leveraging, promoting, or trying to achieve those core interests through our relations, leveraging on our relations with other countries. So, he made it clear, good governance, anti-corruption, security, of course, and the economy. So, yes, the economic diplomacy we've been promoting with countries around the world. On security, yes, with our near neighbors, we've been fighting the Boko Haram war, but also we've been in alliance and cooperation with countries afar to support us in our security challenges on terrorism, etc. And on even anti-corruption, we've been going around trying to have stolen loot returned to the country, and promoting good governance in Africa through the African Union, with Mr. President as African Union champion, anti-corruption champion. So your foreign policy is a lot more, I wouldn't say complicated, but nuanced, depending on the circumstances, and it evolves. So what this government has probably done most is to seek to have good relations with all countries. So, I would call that a positive engagement with countries. And if you have that positive engagement with countries, you're then able to leverage on those good relations to get support in your fight against terrorism, to get support in your anti-corruption fight by getting them to return, looted properties and things like that, and to trade with you. So, so when people say, "Oh, we don't know what Nigeria's foreign policy is," it doesn't really make sense as a question. What's America's foreign policy? Promoting American interests. What's the foreign policy of the British? It's promoting British interests, but in different parts of the world. They have their relations, their bilateral relations with Africa, with Asia, with Europe, and so on and so forth. And it will always be nuanced. So I don't think we can talk of capturing Nigeria's foreign policy in 2 words, So this is it.
Question on security. How would you rate this administration's security performance? Now, we've seen that the issue has moved from just Boko Haram or IPOB to the case of banditry. It looks like we've advanced our performance towards, and I hope to be wrong, towards a negative direction. I mean, we've added banditry. Kidnapping is not new, however, new dimensions. It's been nuanced, like you said, so I'll borrow nuance from you on that front. So how would you rate our performance, this administration's performance on security?
Well, I mean, I think you can see it. I mean, with regards to Boko Haram, they are giving up in droves. Giving themselves up. People who had been fighting with Boko Haram. So the northeast, life is coming back to normal. Maiduguri and a lot of those places, and you can see that it's something that that we're winning, and I would say almost have won as far as Boko Haram is concerned. So I think we've made progress and gains in the fight against Boko Haram. I think that is clear for everybody to see, and that you know in 7 years ago, 8 years ago, when Mr. President became president, I think Boko Haram was a hot topic, and the talk was that it was the most, in terms of killings, the most destructive terrorist organization in the world. So, but today, it's not about Boko Haram any longer that we're talking about. There, other security challenges too. But as far as Boko Haram is concerned, I think that one has really, the government has done very well in really diminishing that threat.
If Nigeria's foreign policy direction is to promote Nigeria's interests, I'd imagine it also includes the interests of its citizens. This is to ask the question around the English proficiency test, IELTS, that Nigeria, which is officially an English is our lingua franca here in Nigeria, so it's our official language, but Nigerians are made to take the English proficiency test to prove how well they speak English, which we are speaking now. And what is your office doing to see that Nigeria is excluded? There's been clamor around excluding Nigerians from taking this test anywhere in the world. So what is your office doing to see that this becomes a reality?
Well, I'm not sure that there is really anything we can do in that regard. I suspect that possibly the reason why certain countries or maybe educational institutions might have put that as a requirement might be because of experience from past students who have been coming in to those educational institutions. One thing we have to remember and be clear about, if we're honest with ourselves, is that we have an uneven standard of education in the country, and quality of education, and that we still need to invest a lot more in terms of quality education. And I think that this could be a reflection of that, that maybe we're getting a lot of students who, on the face of it, are at a certain level, but when put to the test, we find that they're really below that level. So I think that we should be looking at ourselves and our educational system and how we can improve that, so that Nigerian students are worth the certificates that they have. I would say 30 years ago, 40 years ago, there wouldn't be any question about that. But I think if we're honest with ourselves, standard of education probably is not where we would all like it to be.
What is the strength of Nigeria's diplomatic service, and how would you rate the gender balance in the representation, active missions, of course, abroad? So 2 questions there. What is our strength, diplomatic service, and then
how do you mean what is our strength?
So how many countries do we have representation in across the world?
Okay.
And then gender.
Yeah, I have about 104 countries, I believe, and gender, I think we have I can't tell you offhand, but it's, but I think that there's pretty high representation of, of females in the service. You have different cadres.
Yeah, so ambassadors, high commissioners.
So if you're talking about the sort of the FSOs, the foreign service officers, the professional cadre, I would say that maybe female, probably 30% or more, 35%.
Interesting.
Yeah, about that, I would say.
I'm getting personal now with my questions. What would you say are your key achievements looking back the last 8 years as Nigeria's foreign minister?
I would say the strengthening of relations with countries, bilateral relations. Creating that engagement and respect with the countries that we deal with for Nigeria. And that has provided, in my opinion, an enabling environment for us to push our interests in.
Just one.
Yeah, because that then of course you have a lot of benefits that flow from that, But I think that the first thing is to elevate the level and the nature of the relationship with other countries to facilitate to gain respect for Nigeria. And as a result, I think, and also with Mr. President's effort in that regard, we've seen Nigerians being elected into various positions. We've been able to get countries to support our candidates and so forth. And I think also, administratively, within the ministry, there are one or two big initiatives that we hope to launch very soon, like a help desk so that Nigerians everywhere in the world, this is inside of citizens diplomacy, can call in a number wherever they are, if they have any problems. And there's a help desk 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to respond and to assist Nigerians. And I think this is something that was clearly missing that we've been able to also bring and deliver. And also a kind of a platform that we have also developed to match Nigeria, to make it easier for Nigerian businesses to access foreign markets. So we have a business matching a platform that opens up the world actually for Nigerians to Nigerian businesses to access the global market and also to promote foreign direct investment into Nigeria. So I think that's also another concrete deliverable that we've been able to deliver in the time we've been here.
I think the help desk is a great innovation. I'm concerned on how soon you can deliver that, given how much little time you have in office. And that's also interesting because then I have this question from Twitter. I'm not asking, Twitter is asking, what is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs doing? Why does NIDCOM appear to be playing the role of the foreign ministry? That's not my question.
Yeah, I know. No problems. So on the one of the help desk, it's going to be launched before we leave, or inaugurated before we leave. It's actually up, ready and running. So we're just a formal inauguration before we leave. So it's a deliverable that's been achieved. Well, on NIDCOM, it's an agency within the Foreign Affairs Ministry. So it's not an entity separate as such from the orbit of the foreign ministry. And for us, it's not about competition. It's about what's beneficial for Nigerians. So if there's something of benefit to Nigerians, whether it's done by NIDCOM, whether it's done by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the important thing is that it's of benefit to Nigeria.
So categorically, you say NIDCOM is not taking away your job.
But we're doing our job.
Interesting.
We're doing our job. I don't know in what way would they be taking over our jobs? They don't have contact with government, the foreign ministry of other countries. They don't have that connection with them. They are not supervising our embassies around the world. And as I said, foreign affairs, is the primary um, interlocutor, speaker with other countries. NIDCOM can't do that because they don't have that access, that entree into the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of other countries, and they don't supervise our embassies around the world. But of course, you have diaspora, NIDO, Nigerians in diaspora organizations in various countries, and so they might obviously engage. Those would be their interlocutors. Those would be the institutions that they will be dealing with, Nigerians in the diaspora. But of course, Nigerians in the diaspora, their first for institutional interface will be with the embassies in the various countries. But then also, NIDCOM can support in trying to also engage with them.
The NIDCOM is an agency under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Yeah.
Interesting. What will be the carryover, but not for you this time? So what will be the leftover in your handover notes to your successor on what we need to do better, areas we need to touch that you're unable to work on because time is limited?
Yeah, I would say mainly it would be administrative. It will have to be us being able to resolve the funding issue of the ministry. I think that's really cardinal. The funding issue, and the probably the what do you call automation of the procedures, work procedures of the ministry, the computerization of the work procedures and contact with our embassies. So I think those are the two areas: the funding and automation.
Speak to me more about funding.
Well, yeah, we're grossly underfunded. The embassies, so you have perpetual crises, due to the underfunding, and so we really need a mechanism. It's not just the ministry, but of course, I think the parliament and what's appropriated to the ministry and the government at large in coming out with a budget, we really have to, I think, give more to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs if we're going to maintain 104 missions around the world, and also if we're going to reorganize the headquarters by giving it modern means of communication, and especially of communication.
What climate concern have formed a major part of Nigeria's foreign policy under your leadership?
What climate?
Climate concern, so climate change.
Well, no, I mean, we are fully engaged in the various conferences of the parties, on climate issues. We have our what do you call nationally determined contributions that we are going to make as part of our climate action, But of course, I think the big challenge for us as a fossil fuel producing country, oil and gas, is the move to net zero emission. We're putting it at 2060 at the moment, but clearly that's one thing we have to really think about, the transition to clean energy as an energy producing country, how we manage that, because we need the resources from those fossil fuels, from oil and gas and so forth. Those are going to be for a long time the mainstay of our economy. But as we're plugged in to climate action and reduction of fossil fuel consumption, we have to tread carefully going forward.
Do you think that 2060 is feasible for Nigeria? And I'm just quickly going to add that at COP27 last year, or during COP27, the president did an op-ed calling out the hypocrisy of the West. I don't know if you read that. So putting that in mind, how feasible is 2060?
Yeah, we'll have to see. I mean, we'll really have to see, because that's obviously the issue that Western countries have developed on the back of carbon emissions, coal industry, the oil industry, and so forth. And it's almost like you climb up a ladder and you get to the top, and others want to climb up the same ladder, and you now want to pull the ladder away because one reason or the other. So that's something we have to see. We saw with the issue of gas, that for a time there was a concerted effort on the part of Western financial institutions and a number of Western countries not to fund any projects, any more gas projects, for instance. And of course, our gas is coming more and more on stream, and we were arguing that no, the gas should be seen as a transition fuel over this period of time, as we transition away from oil, and allow gas to give us time, to transition away from gas. But then we suddenly saw with the Ukraine crisis that how dependent also the same Western world is on gas, and not talking so much any longer about defunding of gas and so on and so forth. So these are some of those issues where people talk about, the double standards. So we have to look at our own interests, and that has to really be preeminent, and what we have to go by. And the fact of the matter still remains that, as I pointed out to John Kerry, the U.S. Energy envoy, that as the things are now, we, for instance, are actually at net zero, more or less, in terms of emissions. What we're contributing to the global, carbon emissions.
Yeah.
So preaching to us is, of course, their argument is that yes, but it will get more and more if we keep investing in it, and so on and so forth. But still, we are not the ones that have caused the climate crisis and the carbon emissions. But still, we're committed as government to net zero emissions, and we will try and get there.
So if I hear you clearly, words unsaid, you don't know how feasible 2060 is.
Well, no, it's not, because it's feasible, of course, if you have the political will and you're prepared to make all the investments that are required, and tighten your belt where you need to. So it's a question of commitments of future governments. So I'm not in a position to say whether our commitment to the COP process has been a certain way, what the incoming administrations and others will continue to be.
Two questions to the end of this. Last October, there was a security alert about an impending terrorist attack in Nigeria, but especially here in the FCT. And we've seen several occasions where foreign missions issue travel advisories to their citizens on where to go and where not to go to. Correct me if I'm wrong, Nigeria does not have such practice, but then we see cry for help from different Nigerians on how they've been robbed in different places and all. The principle of reciprocity, allows us to do the same. Why has Nigeria not tapped into that?
No, it's not a question of reciprocity. This is just an advice that you give to your own citizens. So if the Americans give such advice to their citizens, it's not, and then it's not an act of reciprocity as such for us to now give it to Nigerian citizens in the U.S. because the U.S. did that in Nigeria. I think that would be the wrong approach. No, I think that where there is a real issue, because don't forget that these are alerts given by embassies in a particular country. So that embassy is not foreign affairs or the foreign ministry. It's a local issue. So our embassy in Khartoum, for instance, will give an alert to Nigerians there or in Ukraine that this is a particular situation. And we would do that in any other country where there was a real issue, in terms of avoiding certain places or whatever. Yeah. But it's for each embassy to decide, because they are living in that place, in that country, and they know best, and the decision is completely up to them.
I saved the best question for the last. So.
Okay.
The clamor around Southeasterners or Igbos being denied their place in Nigeria's political system or political landscape, you're perhaps one of the few people from Southeast Nigeria who occupies this very top position in government. And Igbo presidency, do you have a political ambition outside here? I mean, after this, what's next?
Well, I think your first question is wrong, because if you say occupying this position, I assume you mean as a minister. But the position of minister is constitutional, it's in the Constitution, that every state has an entitlement to at least one minister. So that means at any given time, plus the Federal Capital Territory, normally you will have 36 ministers, and one from each state. So I happen to be one from my state, and so there's no room for any, ethnic exclusion as far as that is really concerned.
So the parliament a few weeks back proposed a bill to stop medical professionals from leaving the country. Now my question is, are there any diplomatic responses to these issues from the government? Is there any in the works, or are there any you're thinking of personally you may want to propose to your successor on how
Nigerian government is proposing? Yeah, so it's a Nigerian domestic affair. It's not a foreign policy. It's not a foreign affairs issue.
Yeah.
But I think it can be done in terms of human rights. I mean, everybody has a right, free movement outside to leave the country as they wish. The only thing is that if you have a bond agreement, like the government pays for your medical education, gives you a scholarship, they could put in to that condition for a scholarship that you will work for the government for 5 years maybe, or something like that, in which case they can insist on that.
Thank you very much for interviewing us. This is where we wrap up to this session of Diplomatic Corner with Premium Times, and we have been speaking to Nigeria's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Geoffrey Onyeama. Thank you for joining us and stay tuned. Do not forget to follow us on all our social media platforms from Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Premium Times. Thank you.